Now, there are numerous examples of this violence toward this objective violence that we find, this systemic objective violence that we find. Again, another example is tipping, the tipping culture. Now, again, this restaurant that expects to preserve itself as a business expects a number of its employees to be paid outside of the economic system, okay, outside of the actual being paid for their labor wage. So this going outside, and again stepping outside of the system, we reveal an underlying violence towards the labor wage and the value of waitresses and waiters. Again, there are a number of these different examples that I've made in the past. Again, we see the same issue in India, where the accepting of McDonald's, even though they reject the beef because of their Hindu Vedic values, the accepting of this type of capitalist company, this multinational, almost image or definitive capitalist company, again, is contradictory to the ethical beliefs of Hinduism that they seem to compromise. So again, we can see another underlying inherent violence here. So there is a numerous amount of examples that can be made, and I'm not going to extend this lecture too long. I'll wrap it up. I'll only keep this one about a half hour. I realize it's a lot different via YouTube. I've even kind of come to realize this myself in the last couple of lectures. It's a lot different. It's a lot harder when they're a lot longer as well. So I think we've also covered a lot here that wraps up what we've been doing, and we can see the globalized dimension to this, the issue of globalized capitalism, and how the focus of a lot of this capital towards the urbanized centers and the redistribution of wealth outside of the outside of the economic system, the capitalist system, to quell these problems, orient towards the third world type countries. So we see again how the globalized dimension here. Now, of course, the underlying example we see again in the Cosby Show, where there are a number of violent, anti-feminist issues, racial issues, class issues that are communicated, or this image presented that itself seems violent. The failure to address topical racial issues seems to remove this family from the normal American society, which seems itself to be violence, or violent towards the African American community. The class distinction has its classical violent act towards the proletariat, and of course we see then with feminism the gender roles and the classic gender division is preserved with the distribution of family power and family control between Cliff and Claire Huxtable. Now, just moving on from this, we see within this kind of establishment of objective violence, just a final comment on ideology, just to wrap everything up. Of course, it wouldn't be a party if we didn't mention ideology. So we can see that violence itself takes on a new shape with capitalism. So ultimately, a lot of the focus of this type of systemic violence that we can see, we see in capitalism. Now, we also see this through different mediated forms, in different sorts of cultural or social norms as well. Not just capitalist. So wherever we can see these types of systems, cultural operations systems, or some sort of functionality within society as well, we can see that there are these underlying, what it is that underlies or establishes these norms, this sub-zero, this sub-base level itself reveals the sustained violences towards people towards the subject. So, a Marxist reading of capitalism might push us to declare the violence of the system comes through as ideology, which itself is advanced and maintained by the people. So, we might initially try to read this type of violence as being within ideology, as something captured by the people and communicated and redeclared, like, no, you must be racist, or women belong in the kitchen, or a number of these sexist or feminist, sexist or racist, statements is a projection and a reestablishment of this ideology. But what we have to remember is that ideology itself is not an abstraction. Okay? It is not produced by society on a level of abstraction. Rather, it contours the very way in which people make sense of their world, providing the conditions for social reality, or this social real that we spoke of already. So ideology itself, it isn't this establishment of, say, racist or sexist divisions. Rather, it's the conditions already embedded in this social reality, or that provide this social reality, that provide us this social reality. It's these problems these elements that are already there in this foundation that come out and are manifest then in these racist acts, or even sometimes we see in the radical alternative and the attempt to quell the idea of racism. For example, what I made the comment about political correctness in the Cosby Show lectures. What we can see with political correctness is that, well, to extend this example, actually, what we see with political correctness is that how sometimes it assumes too much. For example, the term African American excludes 5 countries and a large group of geographically African people, this being the Super-Sahara, the north of the Sahara, Arabia. They lose out on this the description of being African American. So it's presupposed in the term African American that we were referring to a black people, but this politically correct term itself is presupposing a categorizing recognition of a visual identity. Okay, that because it fails as a label, or is not an accurate label for these Arab groups, for example, like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt. So these Arab groups and parts of northern Sudan. So these Arab groups are excluded from the label or the identity of African American, even though it is their continent of origin, because of the underlying presupposition of the black relationship to African American. Not to mention that the term, not to forget that the term African American may also reject or not accept, not identify Afro-Caribbean culture, and just identify a direct relationship between America and Africa, forgetting that there are a large number of African people or American people who have more of an ethnic or cultural tie to the Caribbean.